What provoked this conflict when you decided that you still needed to take this step? Initially, the conflict was provoked by a coup d'etat in Ukraine. By the way, representatives of 3 European countries arrived: Germany, Poland and France. Who were the guarantors of the signed agreement between the Yanukovych government and the opposition? They signed as guarantors. Despite this, the opposition carried out a coup d'etat, and all these countries pretended that they did not remember anything about the fact that they were the guarantors of a peaceful settlement. They immediately threw it into the oven. No one remembers. I don't know if people in the United States know anything about this agreement between the opposition and the government, and about the 3 guarantors who, instead of returning this whole process to the political field, supported the coup. Although there was no point in it, believe me, because President Yanukovych agreed with all this. He was ready for early elections, which he had no chance of winning. To be honest, he had no chance. Everyone knew this. But why stage a coup? Why are sacrifices needed? Why make threats against Crimea? Why did they then start operations in Donbas? I don't understand this. This is a miscalculation. The CIA completed its job in carrying out the coup d'etat, and, in my opinion, one of the deputy secretaries of state said that they even spent a large amount on this, almost $5 billion. But this is a colossal political mistake. Why did you have to do this? All the same things could have been done legally, without any casualties, without the start of military operations, and without the loss of Crimea by Ukraine. And we would not have lifted a finger if there had not been these bloody events on the Maidan. This would never have occurred to us, because we agreed that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, everything should be within the borders of the Union republics. We agreed with this. But we never agreed with the expansion of NATO, especially since we never agreed that Ukraine would be in NATO. We did not agree that there would be NATO bases there without any negotiations with us. We just begged them for decades. Don't do this. Don't do that. What was the trigger in recent events? Firstly, today's leadership of Ukraine has stated that they will not implement the Minsk agreements, which were signed, as you know, after the events of 2014 in Minsk, where a plan for a peaceful settlement in Donbas was outlined. No, the leadership of today's Ukraine, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, all other officials, and then the president himself declared that they do not like anything in these Minsk agreements. In other words, they are not going to fulfill them. And the former leaders of Germany and France said directly today, a year and a half ago, they directly said, honestly, to the whole world, that yes, they signed these Minsk agreements, but they never intended to implement them. They just led us by the nose. Have you spoken with the Secretary of State? With the President? Maybe they were afraid to talk to you? And did you tell them that if they continue to pump Ukraine with weapons, then you will act? We talked about this constantly. We appealed to the leadership of the United States and European countries to stop this process immediately and to ensure that the Minsk agreements are implemented. Frankly, I didn't know how we would do it, but I was ready to do it. They are difficult for Ukraine. There are a lot of elements of independence for Donbas. For these territories, this is true. But I was absolutely sure. I will tell you now that I sincerely believed that if we managed to persuade those people who live in Donbas, they still had to be persuaded to return to the framework of Ukrainian statehood. Then the wounds would gradually heal. Gradually. When this part of the territory returns to economic life, to the general social environment, when they pay pensions and social benefits, then gradually everything will grow together. No one wanted this. Everyone wanted to resolve the issue only with the help of military force. But we couldn't allow this. And it all came to this situation when it was announced in Ukraine that they would not carry out anything, and they also began preparations for military action. They started the war in 2014. Our goal is to end this war. And we didn't start the war in 2022. This is an attempt to stop it.
Do you think you've stopped it now? I mean, have you achieved
Do you
your
think
aims?
you managed to stop it now? Have you achieved your goals? No, we have not yet achieved our goals. Because one of our goals is denazification. This refers to the prohibition of all neo-Nazi movements. This is one of the problems that we discussed during the negotiation process, which ended in Istanbul early last year. But it did not end on our initiative because, in particular, the Europeans told us that it was imperative to create conditions for the final signing of the documents. My colleagues in France and Germany said, "How do you imagine this? How will they sign the contract? With a gun to your head? Russia should withdraw its troops from Kiev." I tell them, okay. We withdrew our troops from Kiev. As soon as we withdrew our troops from Kiev, our Ukrainian negotiators immediately threw into the trash all our agreements reached in Istanbul. And they prepared for a long-armed confrontation with the help of the United States and its satellites in Europe. Here's how the situation developed. And this is how the situation looks now. What is denazification?
But what is, pardon my ignorance, what is denazification?
What does this mean? I just want to say about this now. This is a very important question. Denazification. After gaining independence, Ukraine began to search, as some analysts in the West say, for its identity. And they didn't come up with anything better than to put the false heroes who collaborated with Hitler at the forefront of this identity. I have already said that at the beginning of the 19th century, when theorists of independence and sovereignty of Ukraine appeared, they proceeded from the fact that an independent Ukraine should have very kind and good relations with Russia. But due to historical development, due to the fact that when these territories were part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Poland, they persecuted Ukrainians quite brutally, confiscated them. They tried to destroy this identity. They behaved very cruelly. All this remained in the memory of the people. When World War II began, some of this extremely nationalistic elite began to collaborate with Hitler, believing that Hitler would bring them freedom. The German troops, even the SS troops, gave the dirtiest work of exterminating the Polish population, the Jewish population, to the collaborators who collaborated with Hitler. Hence this brutal massacre of the Polish, Jewish and Russian population. At the head were persons who are well known, Bandera, Shukovich. They made these people national heroes. That's the problem. And they tell us all the time that nationalism and neo-Nazism exist in other countries. Yes, these sprouts exist, but we are crushing them, and other countries are crushing them too. But Ukraine doesn't do this. In Ukraine they made them national heroes. They erect monuments to them. They are on flags. Their names are shouted by crowds who walk with torches, like in Nazi Germany. These are the people who destroyed Poles, Jews and Russians. This practice in theory must be stopped. Of course, Any nation has grown. I say that they are part of the common Russian people. They say that they are not, that they are a separate people. Well, okay, if someone considers themselves a separate people, then they have the right to do so, but not on the basis of Nazism, not on the basis of Nazi ideology.
Would you be satisfied with the territory?
Will you be satisfied with the territory that you already have? I'll finish now. You asked a question about neo-Nazism and denazification. The president of Ukraine came to Canada. This is well known. But the West is silent on the fact that they introduced a man into the Canadian Parliament who, as the Speaker of Parliament said, fought against the Russians during the World War II. Well, who fought against the Russians during World War II? Hitler and his minions. It turned out that this man served in the SS troops. He personally killed Russians, Poles, and Jews. The SS troops, formed from Ukrainian nationalists, did this dirty work. The president of Ukraine stood up along with the entire Canadian Parliament and applauded this man. Can you imagine it? By the way, the president of Ukraine himself is a Jew by nationality. What will you do about it? Hitler has been dead for 80 years. Nazi Germany no longer exists. This is true. You say that you want to put out this fire of Ukrainian nationalism. How to do it? Listen to me. Your question is very subtle. And let me tell you what I think. You won't be offended? Of course I won't be offended. It would seem that this is a very vile question. You say that Hitler has been gone for many years, 80 years, but his business lives on. The people who destroyed Jews, Russians and Poles are still alive. And the president, the current president of today's Ukraine, applauds him in the Canadian Parliament. He gives him a standing ovation. How can we say that we have completely uprooted this ideology if what we see is happening today? This is what denazification is in our understanding. We need to get rid of those people who abandon this theory and practice in life and try to preserve it. That's what denazification is. This is what we mean by it.